I'd like to welcome everyone to Archaic Knowledge Podcast. We have with us today a very special guest, Barry Littleton. And Barry, I'd like to give you a very warm and loving welcome to the show.
No, thank you very much. It's good to see you again, Jock, and nice to meet you, Roz. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Hi, Barry.
Absolutely, man.
Welcome.
It's our honor to have you on. You've lived an unusual life, and I'd like you to give our audience some details about what happened to you at the age of 7.
At the age of 7, I started having experiences that involved waking up like not at home in this room that was like, I've learned now people often call it like the mystery school or something like that. But it was a room that had a table on it, like a grayish room with this black table on it that had these different things on it. One was like a feather, and the first thing you do is you start moving the feather with your mind, okay? And then the next thing you have is a bowl of water there. You have to kind of try to stir the water with your mind and move the water with your mind. Then the third thing on the table were these balls, these 4 balls around this big ball, and you could levitate them and they'd spin. And that was like the most advanced thing in that room to do. So that was, my contact experiences. It started off like that, but I didn't really recognize it as, as a contact type of deal. It's, you think you're a kid that has a great imagination, with the exception that you're really tired the next day because you're not sleeping. So there's a very real factor there, And at that same age is the first time I had incarnated or encountered an earthbound spirit, a ghost, aka that had actually attacked me. I think that happens to a lot of children. Will get attacked by it if you have the gift of a type of mediumship. Oftentimes you're like a bright light to those beings, those earthbound spirits, and they'll attack. They'll try to join with you and do things like that. So I got attacked by one of them at the age of 7, and that's when things kind of started. And I call these childhood experiences. And they went on to adult experiences. Something else that happened when I was a child was this individual would show up sometimes and play with me. And I was pretty well supervised, so I think it says something about what some of these beings can do through the optical nerves to us consciously. But he came and played with me a few times. Then I had an experience that going forward from 7th into 6th grade that I called the acid rain experience, where I woke up on one of these craft, and this individual that had come and played with me a few times was on this craft. And its appearance and vibration, the vibration was the same, but the appearance was different. It had on like an uniform and appeared to be an insectoid. And I wasn't seeing this being like that when it was playing with me, if that makes any sense. Not fully like that, but it had on some glasses you could call kitty cats, is what my mother used to call them, and like a big ball cap, and things that looked a little odd, but nothing that was make you think, hey, is that extraterrestrial or something? But I think that says a lot what they can do to us consciously, and make themselves appear to things in a virtual reality type of situation, and what they can do not just with technology but consciously. Anyway, on this craft, he was floating over these deck plates, and I can see these craft looking over it. Appears to be a mountain pass, and they're sucking the other 2 craft out there, sucking something up underneath them, and then they're like, looks like they're emitting this light. And this being is telepathically this insectoid starting to telepathically answer my questions before I can formulate them in my mind. So that's somewhat, unresting to say the least. But I wasn't paying attention when I was 7. We were talking to each other through telepathy, because I kind of thought everybody might be able to do it. These are things you don't really think of, but that's how he was approaching me, Anyway, so that's, but that experience was involved what he had said that was put in my mind, acid rain. They're trying to deal with the acid rain and the effects that it had were bad for our planet. And then he was going into what I call the M&M effect, which is the microwaves and metals in our atmosphere is very dangerous, especially for them and other beings that aren't from here. Another reason some of them stay in those craft when they might not need them, So anyway, but that was something that, and to be quite honest, no, that was actually when it was the 6th grade. The acid rain experience, that's when they
Okay,
advanced forward. So that's a few years after that.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it's after that.
Well, I
But
just
it
want
was,
to get some.
but I bring that up because that's the one that where it really crossed over from these experiences that could have been imagination
Right.
to definitely reality in my daily life, conscious life, period, is because a week later, I never heard the term acid rain in the sixth grade. And there are other things like these beings would, when I'm in, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody else, but when I've been in the physical presence of a non-human, physically, like for real, I'm tripped out, man. I'm really tripped out. It blows you away because one is that in ways they're in your mind and answering questions before you can ask them. Two is their vibration is much different, faster than ours, it seems like, and that is hard to, not just hard to keep up with, but sometimes it creates something that I call that I kind of correlated to what the gurus and the swamis called Shakti Pat, which is where the guru touches the apprentice and it gives them kundalini release and turns the chakras. It's like an enlightenment touch. And sometimes when I think you're in the biofield of some of these beings, I felt like that, that type of elation. And I think honestly, it leads to, if you're dealing with primitive man and a different society here on Earth, how you would take that a whole nother way, that blissful feeling, a whole nother way than what we do right now with the technological level that we're at right now. So food for thought, I'll throw these things out. But that is something that I look for in other contactees talking about stuff like that. Because I wasn't seeing grays, I wasn't seeing reptilians, none of the stuff you hear about in the media constantly. And that
Right.
so that's and I'm not nothing against those things, but
Right.
when you're looking for answers and you're dealing with a universe, a galaxy itself, just the Milky Way that is, what a billion stars are saying now or so, and then take that into the galactic level and how many galaxies just they saw in Hubble Deep Field alone. I mean that's taken us into a whole nother level, cosmological, conscious wise, and understanding that we're dealing with a conscious phenomenon. I couldn't accept that at first. I was more into because things would happen to me that might be astral or dreamlike, but those weren't things where I could touch things and I was actually there, like on a field trip. Total different experience. I can only speak for myself, not discounting people that have astral and dream experiences, because when you're dealing with another dimension or beings that are on a different vibration, a lot of times we can both experience this in a dreamlike state. And also they will come to deal with us a lot because that difference is very hard to deal with physically, sometimes both by us and them. So again, food for thought I just throw out. So
Well, I just want to say for our audience, many of whom may be megalithic researchers primarily,
that's
that
cool.
the reason that a podcast like Archaic Knowledge would have someone like Barry, who's an experiencer, a contactee since the age of 7 on the show is because, just as Barry was saying about the number of stars in our galaxy alone, in the Milky Way alone, and of course there are many more galaxies in our galaxy in the universe, it's clear that the idea that we are the first advanced race in the universe is complete malarkey. I'm sorry to say, academia, you keep telling us, NASA keeps telling us we haven't found life anywhere, even bacterial life, except for on Earth, but we're looking, and it's like, that's a control system. That's trying
Mm-hmm.
to keep us in a box. And here's Barry saying, what box? Get rid of the box, because we know with logic alone, even if you hadn't had these experiences, we know with logic alone that with that number of stars in the universe, and when we realize that the Big Bang is also a control system, this total nonsense with no science behind it whatsoever. All we got to do is read the books by Eric Lerner, Wallace Thornhill, Hilton Radcliffe, and other researchers who have written in detail about the fact that the Big Bang is nonsense. It's not, our universe wasn't born 13.8 billion years ago. Once we realize that the universe is much older than we have been told, then we understand that advanced races have come in to existence. And we are the last advanced race, not the first, and we're not that advanced.
Very true, very true. And it's some things that that are just natural science we have to look at, which are things that they call the extremophiles right now, that they're finding in the vents on in the trenches, those thermal vents in the ocean. They're finding those creatures like the
Right.
Yeti crab, I believe, is one of them
Yeah,
that
those
sits
little.
on the vents and actually uses its hair to get like bacteria that's spraying out. I mean, that type of extremophile. You've got another branch of NASA and astrobiology that's called astrospeleologist,
Right.
which you're dealing with. Which you're dealing with. And that's talking about the caves of Europa and all these
Mhm,
places.
mhm,
And you
mhm.
tell me there's no extremophiles there? And I personally, I don't want to take this too different a weird way, but I personally believe when we look at projects like the one that used to be called Project Star Map or Project Star Project Star Map, it's the one you could get online and try to get a track name after you for the Glowogen bucket that they dropped from with the astro material on it. And they just did another one of those like that, and they're having problems opening it up. When you deal with organisms that on the galactic level, on the space level, that might be sentient on the collective conscious level, microorganism level, that's war. You start grabbing stuff out there, detonating things out there. And I think we should pay close attention in thinking of things concerning like terraforming and things that you had mentioned at the conference. I thought was brilliant. Is these microorganisms that come in here on these meteorites and have declared war on humanity, and they produce these weird things like that red rain or these weird prion diseases, like mad cow disease, mad deer disease, these weird prion diseases. I think that really needs to be examined at a closer level.
Yeah, yeah, Barry, I've listened to a video you made about these prion diseases and how they might be coming in from space dust. And it's really fascinating. I think people should get over to Barry Littleton's channel
Oh,
and
no
check
thanks.
out his videos because he's at another level. I mean, he's not just saying, "Hey, I saw a UFO," or "I had an encounter with the Draco." He's saying things that no one else is talking about. And so that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have Barry come on our show, because we're here to try to get out of the matrix. We're sitting in this weird thought control system that we've been born into. So the moment we come in, we're already, our parents have these beliefs that they're giving us, the society is telling us how to think, and it's really hard to get out. And so here's Barry going, "I have some things to say." And it's like, I just want to, I think it's
No
good for the
thanks.
Archaic
No
Knowledge
thanks.
podcast to amplify your message, and you have many messages. So for the ancient history researchers, what's a good way for them to proceed? Because right now they're running around the globe, thinking that primitive humans are cutting stones and building tombs for kings. So do you have any ideas for them to help them get to the truth?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So I gotta get out of the mode I was in because I had a question for you actually, but I gotta come out of that mode. So
You can say
um
whatever you want, man. You don't have to answer that question. You can say whatever you
we,
want.
I mean, we come back to that. Just real quick, something that you have brought up some fantastic aspects about the terraforming that went on here, however long at the beginning of this planet, actually, and ongoing things like the the lake beds, not the water not carving all the lake beds, that all those a lot of that was already done another way. And, I think that's fascinating. But taking that and kind of advancing that a little to what we're dealing now, things that just seem to get covered up. There was something about what 15 years ago that came out 10 years ago was the dragonfly drones that had those weird symbols on them,
Hmm.
and they were only picked up in what it was when infrared or ultraviolet, whatever it was, and they seemed to have a connection with some of the trees, and then that just all got dismissed later on.
Hmm.
But the way those things appeared to be to me, they look like something that was maybe re-engineered from something that's been creeping around in our atmosphere for a long time, slightly phased out. And I think when dealing with things like I don't want. I gotta go Star Trek, man. Sorry, I'm a Star Trek guy. The Genesis device. We start dealing with the Genesis devices and things that are terraforming type of devices. How would they really operate, especially over a million year cycle or thousands of years cycle? We deal with things like the Bracewell probes and the Von Erich probes. Sorry, Von Neumann probes. These things are fascinating concepts. Really when so that's my question. Do you think there could be a connection there?
Well, just for our audience, the continental terraforming theory deals with the idea that the continents were built in the distant past, and then geology comes in later with the erosion of the continental concrete. Slowly, these granules form in these form layers in the low-lying localized areas, and then fossil material is in there. Life forms get caught in this soupy stuff, and that forms these layers. So then you have the fossil beds, but that's all from the ancient continental concrete structures that were built here. So geology and the terraforming theory work together, but we're being told that everything is natural geology, and I think that both are the case. The Genesis machine, because I'm a big Star Trek fan too. Some people not know about that. It's from that show where I think is it Wrath of Khan?
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan, and they go in with this Genesis thing, and it's supposed to be able to form life on a planet. So that's what most people think of, like Elon Musk thinks of it this way. Terraforming is going to a planet and helping to make it suitable for life, and bringing organisms and get water and organisms and trees, and so trying to get oxygen in the atmosphere. That's not really what my theory is about, although I believe that the ancients who did build the continents did it specifically to channel water in certain ways and to create continents that would support a thriving biosphere. So they gave us the basis. The crystalline material is what the plants use to grow, and then they translate that crystalline material, those minerals, for us. They make them bioavailable. So without the plants, which had to have the continental concrete, the crystalline concrete to grow on, without those things, we couldn't exist. So we're basically alive because of the crystalline minerals that you see in these mountains. So, but back to what we were saying about I think the ancient history researchers really need a new way to try to figure out the past. Do you have any? I mean, that advanced races exist. How can this knowledge help ancient history researchers to figure out what's going on this planet with these amazing structures?
Wow. I think that, I see that, now we've got things that we didn't have in the past, like Ancient Aliens that touches on a lot of that. But I think that when really dealing with what different cultures are saying about different star races that have come here or that have planted us here really needs to be taken seriously, and looked at from more of a whole like situation surrounding some of the few, not even just megalithic, but also like the pyramids and different things that are going back that we still can't reproduce. Everything, even just going that far back, like what was it, 9,800 years around that time? Everybody's saying that we had the end of the ice age around them, that those impacts came, those three impacts came out of the whatever it was time. I think that looking at that, and even that just, and I'm by no means a religious guy. I'm spiritual, but I have no religion. But when you're looking at things like the myth of Noah's flood, that does prove it, though. In some ways, that definitely something happened that raised the sea level here in a matter of a month or two. That's something I wouldn't want to endure right now. And if you weren't something that could go underground, you're in big trouble.
Right. Well,
That's
Graham Hancock has some amazing books, and one of my favorite books of his is Underworld. Not many people talk about that one. He spends the first 60 pages talking about ice, and you're like, how could anyone talk about ice for 60 pages? But he has a lot to say about ice, and man, it is amazing. And he talks about how there are ways for inland meltwater lakes to suddenly, if they break, if the edge of the ice breaks, it can flood out into the ocean and cause calamity. And so the flooding thesis is clearly shown in the evidence. It's just I think that there was obviously more than one global flood through the history of this planet. In fact, many, 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 many. And we're just, the continental concrete is being tested over and over and over again, but it stands strong, basically, with slight erosion over time. But the flooding is destroying civilizations. And if you wanted to destroy civilization, if you were an advanced race who created, let's say, a slave race like perhaps us, I don't know, and you said, I'm sick of you guys, maybe you'd create a flood on purpose. I don't know, maybe.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, and looking at like Graham Hancock and was Randall Carlson were the first two people I'd heard talking about that. And actually that when some of these meteors came in, now with those satellites, they found some of that. Was it the one in was it Greenland, the Greenland ice shelf? That thing came and impacted there. Another one was what, Saginaw Bay, and another one, oh, where was the third one? Was Lake Ontario?
Was it the
I think that they,
Hiawatha crater you're talking about?
yeah, yeah, the ice shelves, and at that time they all would have been ice shelves. And when those things hit, those meteors and what the impact craters they found, what was it? It was what, Jock, is what, about a little less than 2 miles,
I think it
but
was,
still
what
that.
was it, 2 miles and then 15 miles long. I mean, it depends on
Yeah,
which one you're talking about, but
yeah, I think the one that the ice shelf, the Greenland ice shelf, that one, that was like the biggest one for that little period, right? And I know that Carlson was saying that they all were part of the Taurid meteor shower. I found that fascinating, which has connection to the Pleiades. I think that's real interesting, And if something were to be guided in here like that, like what you just suggested, and that man, and when those impacts would have came in, I tried to look that up a little bit, and it was something like the impact would have been what, 2,500 degrees when those meteors came in. They hit that ice shelf. That's going to send up so much ice that it creates a lot of those things we have, like the Carolina bays, and those aren't even meteors. It's from those huge pieces of ice. So anything that then just got plummeted,
right.
I think we're
Well,
very fortunate in that.
in your video where you talk about this, you go into this in detail, and you do mention this, that when these meteorites are hitting, they're breaking apart the ice, and the ice chunks come up into the sky, and then they go, oh, we're just going to come back down again, smash. They're killing organisms, large animals. They're making their own craters. So people got to get over to Barry's channel, because he has such incredible, great intel, and he's not just
Thanks, Jeff.
talking about beings that he met, and then, oh, people could say, I don't believe you. Fine, don't believe him if you don't want to, that's fine. But he's also talking about real stuff, real science, that great researchers like Randall Carlson, who's an astounding geologist. I mean, he's read more papers than anybody on the planet. He reads, I think he said he read a paper a day on his Joe Rogan interview or something like that. And it's like, seriously? And that's a lot of information that this guy has. And then there's Graham Hancock coming together with Randall. And so Barry's trying to get the word out about this real science, alongside of all these incredible contacts that he's had and this information that he's been given. So I'd like to sort of go toward that. Roz, do you have any, I don't want to, just ramble on while you're sitting there with tens of 20 questions to ask Barry. So if you have any questions for Barry, feel
Oh
free to
yeah,
chime
man.
in.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I do have. Of course, I have questions for Barry. You mentioned Noah's flood, and it's also in relation to the Book of Enoch. And from there, we know about the Nephilim, and the fallen angels that were imprisoned here on Earth. We know that the Bible also mentions, not just the Book of Enoch, that the war continued after the flood as well, to eradicate the seed of the reprobates. But at the end, we learn that the fallen angels have been kind of imprisoned here on Earth. We don't know exactly where. It's believed to be somewhere underground, according to the sources. And my question is, do you feel those entities are manifesting their influence physically here on Earth, or do you feel they're kind of controlling the narrative by controlling people?
I think both. That's a great question. I think both. I think one is that, like right now, like for example, all the narratives are so controlled right now, even the narrative about contact itself. And I mean this openly, all right, but even we have like things like Ray Hernandez, who runs CCRI, the formerly called Free Foundation for Research for Extraterrestrial Encounters. They did like a survey of worldwide contactees. And it showed decisively that most of the contactees, look at the pie charts, is positive. I mean, like incredibly skewed towards positive contact. And that is not what you would expect to see. Not what you hear about the media. You hear about reptilians, grays, anal probes, all that old stuff. And that completely saturates the contact phenomenon as far as in training our brain. So if we have things that are trying to come from the divine field and interact with our brains consciously, which might be advanced races, beings, it's already getting tarnished by what we've been saturated with and our brains entrained with. That's one way. Another way, I think, as far as what you asked concerning manifesting, like physically, I think we're seeing that here quite a bit. I think we have things that have come through during the time there was atomic testing here and different hydrogen bomb testing. You've got things that have come through the cracks that are still here. You've got these things underground. You mentioned that, and touching on that, I don't want to get too weird, but I think it's very relevant because it's connected. I give these blind targets quite often to a friend, good friend of Jock too, Jessica Jones, and she doesn't know what she's looking at. And sometimes, like something like per se, the chupacabra. You familiar with that one? I'm sure.
Yeah, of course,
Right.
of course.
And the one before it, that went through two phases where it went from looking like this thing that looked like a gray type of thing with the spikes on it to suddenly be this dog that looks like thylacine, Tanzania thylacine, what it looked like to me. I mean that, but the original one that came out, I was just curious, and I gave her this as a blind target because I met another gentleman a few years ago named John Vivinko, and he's a well-trained remote viewer, used to be government connected, and he had viewed the chupacabra, and several things he said. So I gave this to Jessica as a blind target. She had no idea she's looking at, and several things she hit on was the same thing. One of them would be that this was like an underground type of a laboratory that these things escaped from during a hurricane. Enough to where they both mentioned this, and it made me go and look back. This lab got hit by a hurricane in Puerto Rico, and these things escaped. So I went and looked back, and there actually was a hurricane in '94 when the chupacabra thing started going around, that started surfacing on our bells when I first heard it, bro. Anyway, but but it was '94, and it was a Hurricane Marilyn was actually hit Puerto Rico. So that made me go type in Puerto Rico and genetic laboratories, and all sorts of stuff comes up, man. You start tracing back like how far that goes back to '94 and things like that. But that is ultimately demonic. That is the same type of demonic type of things that we hear about that went on in the Bible, the beasts they're talking about. And Revelations, that I think especially talks about that. That same type of demonic thing, and these underground facilities, these chimeras they're making, these controlling of the narratives of anything positive to all this negative stuff that stops us from becoming a type 1 civilization, which means we start using the parent star as our primary power source, opposed to fossil fuels that destroy our own biosphere. But I'm just saying.
Well said. And
Yeah.
of course, we know that fossil fuels is just a euphemism for material, oil that's generated chemically and mechanically deep within the earth, has nothing to do with dead dinosaurs and dead plants, and it's virtually inexhaustible. But it's also true that using the sun's energy makes more sense than drilling for this oil that is Terra's inner lubricant. So, for people who don't know what the prime directive is, it's a Star Trek term that basically talks about an imperative that benevolent and neutral races, neutral to us, they don't want to hurt us, benevolent to us. These advanced races have a prime directive, which is that they will not interfere with us unless we ask for help. If we ask for help, they'll come and help us, maybe. They might choose to, but they're not going to come and interfere with us because they know that we have free will, and that's the most important thing, that our free will is respected. Now, this was brought out in Star Trek, and people think, oh, Gene Roddenberry, he's a genius. He came up with all these amazing things. He didn't come up with all those amazing things. He probably came up with some really cool things in Star Trek, but he was given the mandate, not just the information, but the mandate to get this information out from advanced races who want to help us to understand that we were not the first advanced race in the universe, that there are other races, and they're slowly acclimating us to the fact that we are not alone in the universe. We have a galactic family. So Leslie Clark Stevens, who created Outer Limits, which is a show way back in the day, gave the script, let's say, the outline of Star Trek to Gene Roddenberry. Leslie Stevens was in the Office of Naval Intelligence. So Gene Roddenberry was given this information through the Terran military, okay, which was giving it to him through originally from the Galactic Federation. People who don't know about the Galactic Federation, well, I didn't know about them until a couple of years ago when I started talking to people who are deep into extraterrestrial events, let's say. I didn't even believe in UFOs or ETs until I went to the Bosnian Pyramid Complex and spent a couple of years there and started talking to people like Barry, who are outside the box, who helped to give me downloads to help me understand that we are not alone. We are not alone. So when Barry's talking about these positive races, there's neutral races and positive benevolent races who are basically adhering to the prime directive. They're not going to force us to do anything, but they're going to give us some clues through dreams, through TV shows, and now through movies, because the Luciferians were heavily involved in the movie industry for a long time. And the benevolence, I have some information from a reader named Vanessa Lyle. The benevolence are now coming into the movie industry, and they're saying, we're going to do the same thing. From the Pleiades, we're going to make some movies here that are more positive and not full of these weird Luciferian messages. So we have help if we want it. We're being given clues. Most races, as Barry is saying, are either neutral or benevolent to us. And then there are a few regressive or negative races who are giving us some problems.
Jock, you mentioned that there are some neutral species and benevolent, some that don't intervene and some that do intervene, right, in our process. And regarding this, I want to mention about the Colaris incident in the 60s. That's a documented case full of witnesses. It happened in the Amazon jungle, and there are still witnesses about this case where, strange objects just flew by, terrorizing the locals. They call them chupa chupas. It's close to chupacabra, but it's chupa chupas because they used like a beam to shoot at people, at locals, to paralyze them and extract blood samples. And some people got really hurt, and some of them even died. I think there are a couple cases of people who died, and the army went there. The Brazilian army went there, stood there for like 60 days and documented all those objects that would take all kinds of shapes and sizes and would go underwater and through the air. So they got all the photos. After 60 days, they've closed the case. But I feel like, there was a species that something triggered those beings to intervene and, harm the people. And it's kind of scary, when we look at things that those beings can also intervene in this material plane. I don't know what's happening, but yeah, I think it's related to the nukes as well, and all the crazy stuff that went on, with all the technology evolving. So what do you think about this, Barry? How can we ward against those beings? How can we live like be relaxed that we won't encounter anything like that?
A couple of things on that. And one is I want to touch on the Gene Roddenberry thing. Two things about that. There's a book that's been out for a long time called Earth, the Only Planet of Choice. And in that's like a channeling type of book from these beings that they call the Council of Nine. And during the channelings, there are these group of people that are asking questions throughout the book. And one of them on there is JR. There's a GR, it's Gene Roddenberry. He's a part of that. And something else concerning him, I had the ex head of astrophysicist from Harvard, Dr. Rudy Shields. He had taken an interest in some of my contact scenarios, and I got to talk to him for almost weekly for a while. We did that, and it was so enlightening because he's not a contactee; he's strictly a scientist, but he specializes in black hole theory. And he had told me that when he was much younger, at one of the observatories there in California, that Gene Roddenberry would come in there and have lunch with him and all the astronomers and astrophysicists. And he would have on his CHP, California Highway Patrol. And when you guys told me that, I kind of cracked that joke, like, Eric Estrada, a uniform like that? Sorry, it's just a corny joke, chips. Anyway, but he said he was still dressed like that. He'd come in there and have lunch with them because he was an officer. But he would sit there and ask them questions like, what would it actually be like consciously to go beyond the speed of light? And questions like that he was asking, taking notes. So it's interesting how he's putting all these things together on top of what you said, Jock, to kind of make Star Trek come forward. And that is, I think, one of the ways that kind of Raz is, I think, kind of battling that. You know, it's very interesting because when dealing with obviously this planet and something in the Milky Way, we've got an issue with something that goes on with slavery and negativity, and that stuff is going on. That's coming up a lot. You know, I used to think that some of these people that are what they call SSP, and they having they're hit by these directed energy weapons, but they're having these things happen that are really showing this to be true right now. You know, that these are targeted individuals, and it's this whole dark thing that's an assault on people that I think come in here with natural mediumship abilities, natural psychic abilities, natural star lineages. They're trying to shut that stuff down. Okay. And you know, Jock, I could have sworn, now correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I could have sworn I saw you posting something a few days ago about maybe it was either McElroy or the Lacerda files.
Oh yeah, the Lacerda files, yeah.
Yeah. You know, interesting story, because when they start talking about what sounds very much mimics the Star Wars theme, in terms of you have like a type of galactic empire that's somewhat dark in this galaxy, or this galaxy, this Milky Way galaxy, and then you've got a faction also that are almost like Jedis that are also not going against what the Republic is doing or what the Empire is doing, and they're a problem. So, and then you've got this criminogenic factor, period. And this criminogenic factor is wiped clean and sent to a prison planet. And then you've got these Jedi that are wiped clean and sent to a prison planet, and they're calling that Earth. You know, until I started doing a bunch of regression work, I was a firm believer in that to a degree, just based on the horrible things that I saw here. And, you know, I have yet in the regression work I've done, which is quite a few now, experienced that at all with any of these clients. So it's always been a choice to come here and not, which is unbelievable, but it is what it is. Anyway, I'll get back to your question, Rouse, make sure I answer that fully.
Well, there's regarding the Lacerta files, it's a really deep, complicated story that deals with a reptilian female who came to the surface from caverns in Norway, and she's a Saurian. The Saurians have been here much longer than any other race, and they consider this their planet, but they had an amnesia event themselves from a cataclysmic war between a positive and negative pair of races in the skies of our planet. And so they only know their history, and therefore the history of Terra and our history, from this disk that they found after the amnesia event, that the positive race in the war had left behind. So they have this information that is, you know, if you believe the story, is good information from a positive race about how we were created, how there were seven, we're the seventh creation. There's been five civilizations, we're the fifth, in the fifth civilization now. There's been four apocalypses, but there's seven creations, and we're the seventh one because the previous ones had been destroyed either purposely or by apocalypses. So it's really deep and complex. Go find the Lacerta files, LACERTA, to help us get toward the real history of our race and our planet. And everyone use your own discernment. Maybe you don't believe any of this, and that's fine. I would love to see if I can get Lacerta on the show, either in person or through a channeler, and see what we can do. I'm going to talk to Vanessa about that. But anyway, so we're we're way deep in so many subjects, but it's okay. It's totally fine. See, because we basically, we know about our existence is so close to zero, and so anything that comes out is going to be good. So what do you feel, Barry? Where do you want to take this right now?
The thing about with the Lasorda thing and the Saurians, that can somewhat be proved scientifically in terms of there's two different dinosaurs that show that even Star Trek Voyager even did a thing about this, that these beings they have stayed on Earth and not been wiped out by one of these cataclysms. Their brain structure, they would have been the dominant form here, and they were going more humanoid. There's been a lot of work done on that, so when you're dealing with the Saurians, that's what those are said to be. And when I started dealing with a lot of what was almost Kemetic type knowledge, they talk about that these Saurians from Earth weren't really negative. They're not even friends of humanity, obviously, but they're not really negatives, not like these AKA Dracos. And these Dracos came here, and some sort of hybridization went on, and that's how things got really messed up. But when looking at like something like Ray Hernandez's pie chart from this survey that they put out, this 5-phase survey that's really well done academically, but it had a question on it, like the first part of the survey, reptilian activity. I've never had any, so I'd skip by that one. But there were several people that did answer it, hundreds, and it wasn't what I expected to see. You see, on the negative part is a small part of the pie chart. Positive is pretty large, but the biggest part is unknown, unsure. When I ask him why, they have to fill out a couple sentence why or a paragraph why. He said, Barry, a lot of answers were the same, that they weren't harmed by these beings they weren't hurt, there were no testing or anything, but just their physical appearance of a 10-foot tall, 9-foot tall bipedal crocodile was too much. They were just scared to death, but they never hurt them or did anything. And that's just not what you expect. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sticking up for reptilians and going pro-reptilian or anything, but I'm just saying I don't think that we're getting the right information overall. Everything we get is so skewed. I would expect to see on that pie chart, guys, I would have thought that what should have probably been like all negative would have been like the whole chart, just a little bit of, but it wasn't like that.
Right.
So that's something when looking at the Lacerta files, I think, to maybe take serious in terms of just evaluating information. Don't throw the bathwater out with the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, one important thing about the neutral race of the reptilians that Lacerta, this reptilian female who came out onto the surface and talked to a Norwegian male, one important thing about their race is that they have the ability, like most advanced races, to turn a switch in our brain. It's an on-off switch, and she explained it in detail. We were created with this switch to make us manipulable by the race that created us, or the races who created us. They left this switch in, and the switch is this. So from the point of view of the reptilian, let's say, that's dealing with us, whether they're neutral or positive or whatever, they can throw the switch, and it's see us, the reptilians, see us as we are, or see us as we want you to see us. So they can flip a switch and they can look like a human. And it's all in our brains. It's not shape-shifting. I'm not saying shape-shifting doesn't exist. I'm just saying they don't need to shift shapes. They can just throw the switch in our brains using telepathy or psionic abilities, I guess you'd call it more accurately, and say, see us as we want you to see us. Oh, we want to look like an owl. We're the Greys. We want to look like an owl. So they go, ow, ow, ow. And that's what happens. They look like a 3-foot tall owl suddenly. And
It's
then people
actually the
can't
optical
recognize it.
nerves. They're
So
very,
yeah,
our optical nerves are very accessible. Yeah, I
so
agree.
that explains so much about, like, you started this interview with talking about how they can appear in certain ways to us, and it's probably usually to help us calm down. They'll look human, or they'll look mellow, or they'll look not too scary, so that we won't freak out and run away. But there's other reasons to do it, like the Greys do it usually for negative reasons.
And it gets really concerning, because at one point you start dealing with these beings that are, like Razmus wanted to talk about, the beings that maybe are on the higher level, the more faster vibration. You start dealing with them, and some of them have the abilities to actually project total environments consciously to us. They don't need technology. They do this consciously. You're around one of these beings within its biofield, and it's completely projecting a completely environment to you, different environment to you, like a holodeck itself, or a jump room itself. The being is doing that. That is, that's taking things to a whole another level consciously that we have to really be aware of. Something I want to bring out, to kind of answer your question before, Ross, because I feel like I kind of only kind of touched it a little, because I was talking about Roddenberry, this and this, jumping around. But something concerning what people call the Akashic records. Everybody hears that the Akashic records, we have a lot of people saying now that they work with them. But really, what are they? Beyond the first time I heard it talked about was Edgar Casey said it was the records of space and time. But really, what does that mean? What they are black holes. And I mentioned a gentleman by the name of Rudy Shields that did a lot of work with the data from the observatories. And what they showed is something he called the black holes. He calls them MECOs, magnetically eternally collapsing objects. And what the MECO actually is the mechanism inside of the black hole that holds the information. So when something goes through the black hole itself, like this pin, all right, there's a perfect copy made on the surface that they're calling the quantum hologram. And then what the actual pin goes through, but on the quantum hologram is this perfect copy that becomes stored in the MECO. And the MECO is stored around almost like the way the accretion disk looks. Okay, so what I'm saying is, he's saying that the black holes are the hard drives of the universe, and that they operate on what's called quantum conscious waves. And the conscious waves operate two ways, helical and spherical. And within our brains, we have something called microtubules throughout the body, but we'll relegate it to the brain for this. Microtubules of the brain, okay, like the neuron network and these things it composes. But what that actually does is they're actually spherical, okay? And, so are these conscious waves. So that means if we're going to access these MECOs, these Akashic records, we can do it consciously, and that get me to asking people like Judy, I was like, what do you think? What do y'all think that the speed of thought is? He gave me some experiment. I can't tell you what it was. I'm sorry, I'm not a physicist. But he he said somewhere they thought around something around the 100,000 the speed of light, 100,000 times the speed of light. So in Star Trek wise, that means instantaneously we can get one of these and access them consciously. But that is these MECOs. And taking this back to what Roz was saying, so if we have a type 4 or 5 civilization that is maybe even no longer in existence, okay, but it would still be existing within the MECO, within the quantum hologram. It would still exist, and they can still access us consciously through our brain waves. That's why this is so important, that we don't get so entrenched in negative encounters and things, because when you have actually maybe what are divine type of beings trying to contact you, you turn it into something different. There's suddenly they're grays there, and so we do have some free will that is somewhat strong. I don't care what anyone says. We do have strength. We're not that weak all the way. We can turn something like that into a negative encounter. And by no means am I trying to discredit those that have negative encounters. There's all sorts of different types. I've not had those experiences, but I know others have, and my heart goes out. I'm not trying to discredit, but I'm trying to put more illumination to maybe how it happens. So, so these things that our brains getting entrenched, entranced with this negative stuff, negative, negative, and negative through the media constantly. We don't see any of the positive stuff.
Right.
And is obviously slavery a problem in this Milky Way? Yes, so that's a problem too. But we got to try to bring where the lady with the deals, that stuff's like this right now with the he's got to leave me a little.
Right. So there's a lot of positive races out there, and the reason we don't necessarily see them as much as the negatives is because, as we mentioned before, the prime directive, the negatives don't adhere to the prime directive. They don't care. They'll interfere with you right now. They'll come in and take you onto their ship. They'll abuse you. They'll enslave you. They'll torture you. They'll kill you. They'll eat you. So not every negative race eats humans, but the Draco do. And so Alex Collier has been telling us this since the 1990s, and slowly people are starting to listen. And then we had other insiders in the secret space program come forward and say, yeah, there's slave trading, but more than that, the trafficking of humans as food for other races. And he saw that. I'm not going to go into detail. He didn't really want to go into detail, but so we know that we are food for some races. This ain't good, but I want to go to the geometrical structure that you're talking about when you're talking about the MECOs, the MECO MECOs. We could imagine that these little tiny, because you're not talking about massive structures, you're talking about little tiny black holes all around that, like in a river, you have vortexes, right, that form naturally. And you could imagine that the plasma universe has vortexes throughout it. And 99% of the universe is plasma from our science so far. So that's one way to think about it. And plasma is a living being, or resembles a living being in its structure. So scientists who are real scientists in academia have told us this. So it's like there's the whole universe is plasma and is living and has these vortexes as the energy is flowing around. There's no vacuum out there. That's academia's desire to try to control us by saying it's scary out there, stay home, Truman. No, it's not a vacuum, it's plasma, and it's moving, and you can imagine the vortexes, and you could imagine what you're saying takes us to a new level, because what if those vortexes were places, libraries of information for every single thing that's ever happened in the universe?
Mm-hmm. And when dealing with Rudy, I had to accept that some of my contacts were coming from another universe, not just another galaxy, another universe. And I tried to dispute him with this. And then, as he said, my mathematics didn't hold up. So I got to, it is what it is. But when dealing with that and some of the ways that, like now, this universe is based on the spiral. Okay. But when, and then the spin, but when you go to another universe, it can be based on the crystalline, different shapes, even amorphous metals, a whole nother thing going on there, so that's just things for us to realize when we're dealing with creation, how really vast it is, definitely. And you've got these super black holes, these super MECOs, but then you've also got ones taking it down to, he was describing calculations they're doing that are putting a MECO almost to our individual molecule. So that takes us to these races that can not just bilocate, but teleport across actually galaxies and distances through actually accessing these MECOs and the black holes within their own body. Whole very fascinating thing going on there. When dealing with some of these really advanced civilizations that are using the fabric of space itself for their power source, or these MECOs themselves for the power source, that's when we're getting these things Michio Kaku calls type 5 civilizations and stuff like that, And can you imagine when they start going micro and going into not just the nano, but the pico? And I bring that up because some of those implants that Dr. Lear had removed, they were saying had like 2 miles or a mile more of carbon nanotubes in them if you'd have stretched them out. Microcarbon tubes, I believe they're called, but said there was like a mile worth of them. That kind of engineering. And can you imagine that type of a civilization making what they call a Dyson sphere? Something that is actually a structure that encompasses the sun and also all the way out to Pluto? I mean, that is, can you imagine what they would be able to do? Inward revolution? That would make Martin Short and inner space look ridiculous.
Well, it makes sense that if we live in a universe of infinite time, or according to Alex Collier from the Andromedans, who he's been in contact with, he was on their ship for 90 days over the period of time. He says that they believe that the universe is 21 trillion years old. So whether we look at it from real science's point of view, which is that so far science hasn't found a real beginning to the universe, real science, not academic science, which is the controlled science, but real science outside of academia says we haven't found a beginning to the universe. We know there's no Big Bang, but we haven't found the beginning. You could either take that, so in an infinite universe, a universe of infinite time, or you could take Alex Collier's number from the Andromedans and say 21 trillion years. Either way, races have had such a long time to advance that to them, building a planet, building a sun, building space itself, building Dyson spheres like you're talking about that would protect, that would be a home for a solar system, and protect you from all sorts of calamities, which is another reason that the hollow Earth makes sense, by the way, because that's basically a mini Dyson sphere. You create your hollow home and you live inside. You don't necessarily live on the surface where you're going to get global flooding to destroy your civilization. You're going to get asteroid impacts. You're going to get cosmic rays that can cause cancer. So instead of all that, instead of global droughts, global famine, instead of that, you're inside. You've got a source of light from sound. Corey Good gave us that from the Anshar. So they create light from sound inside. They don't have to have a burning ball of plasma, not a burning nuclear furnace like academia tells us the sun is. Well, of course, that's not really what it is. It's a plasma light bulb, but you don't have to have that. You can have light created by sound. And so you have a source of illumination. You can grow crops from the light created by sound. And Tesla told us that light can be nothing else than sound in the ether. So there's a light sound connection. Tesla told us this a long time ago. He's from Venus. They brought him here as a baby. This is from Vanessa Lyle again. So this is solid information from someone who knows what she's talking about. They brought Tesla here from Venus. He was found in the field. His parents were directed to find him. He was raised. He didn't know he was from Venus, but he was getting downloads as he became an adult. He was starting to get downloads, and he said himself, my brain is a receiver. He didn't say, I'm a genius. I'm a human genius. He said, I'm a receiver. I'm getting this stuff. I'm getting blueprints, and I'm going to help humanity with these blueprints. That's my mandate. He came from inside. He didn't know he was a messenger from Venus. You know, he didn't know that. He had signed up for that contract as a Venusian, but he didn't know as a human on Earth that he was a messenger to us to help us. So we have many races like the Venusians who are helping us in these subtle ways, doing their best. We said no to Tesla. We said, no, we're not going to do that. The bankers shut him down, but we still have his stuff. We still have his info, as much as we didn't get stolen by the controllers. And little by little, the internet's more and more on fire with Nikola Tesla. I think he's probably one of the most searched terms these days. So people are really starting to come back to him and going, wow, this guy had some real information. Let's find out as much about him as we can. So yeah, these MECOs are amazing. I remember you mentioning the MECOs at the conference, and it was my first introduction to this. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing. And then all the other stuff that happened since then has taken over my consciousness, but you bringing it back again, really, it's really nice to hear it again, because it does make sense that these whirls in the ether or in the plasma universe could be records of information that we could access. It wouldn't have to be that someone else is coming through the MECO to help us or hurt us or change us or inform us. We could just access these MECOs, right?
Yeah, consciously. You know, I was on a ship, and I don't know if you've seen my presentation, but I actually showed pictures of this ship. It was started off looking like I've always had some interest in George Adamski, however you pronounce it. But the ships that he had underneath had these balls underneath them. I've seen crafts like that, so I find that interesting, you know. But this one looked like that, quite similar to that, with the light on top of it. But this appeared to be, quote unquote, Jock, your nut and bolts type of a craft. And I had just been on board this thing, and when I got back, I'm watching this thing, okay, and it starts like looks like there's almost static from a TV like around it, that type of effect, and this thing starts morphing, and it starts morphing into what looks like these crystals, these crystal balls with these spike stalagmites, I think you would call it, coming off, and it's glowing inside with a rod connecting. There's three of them, and it's turning in the sky. Okay, and it really, really, at the age I was at, which is about what, 18, I think it was, this really pushed me to the brink perceptually. Okay, to watch this. And now I can tell you what this thing was actually doing. You know, and something else that Rudy had taken interest in. He's like, "What was that like when that experience was over? When it's finished?" I said it just looked like it was like a light, like the thing just went out. I could still see its shadow kind of moving, then it was just gone. And he started yelling. He said, "That's exactly what you should have said." "What do you mean by that?" He said, "That's the quantum hologram you were seeing right there." He said, "What that was you had a craft that was going to another universe, and it was doing a pattern of unfoldment to match its destination to where it was going universally." And I'd been on a craft that, in a different experience, he took a lot of interest in, because in one room in this craft were all these little, I call them micro wormholes, opening up and closing. And this room made me so sick to be in there, because it's like you're almost like you're on a merry-go-round or something. And there's a black beam in the middle of it. And I remember holding a circular spiral black beam, holding this black beam. So I like passed out and throw up. But what this is, and at one point there's something jumps in front of me. It looks like a pink ball of energy, almost orb-like, and it starts unfolding. That looks almost like my state flower, a sunflower, and then it goes into one of these wormholes that opens, that closes, and another one comes out of another one. And I'm picking up, we're like water out of fish in your density, you know. And what this is a craft that has a room or a place in it that can actually generate, or at least secure, these MECOs, these smaller MECOs, and then choose the MECO with the most consistency for its path of destination. That's heavy. See, I was underestimating how not just the organic factor of the craft I've been on board, but the sentientness of them. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with some of these that are space organisms that are perhaps, I don't know, thousands, if not millions of years old, that still have access to not the race memory, but our soul life memories. We don't have that here when we incarnate here. Most of us don't. Partially immortal souls. It's like you just graduated 12th grade in high school, but you can't remember kindergarten to junior to 11th grade. That sucks. And that's kind of what goes on here. That's why this place is backwards like that. If we had access to our soul life memories and telepathy too, our whole societies would be different. It'd be much harder to hide negative thoughts and do some of the demonic things we see now.
Well, I think we do have telepathic abilities that are latent and are being consciously suppressed by frequencies. Tesla, again, we always come back to Nikola Tesla. He said that the universe's energy vibration frequency. So when we begin to realize that the entire universe is not void with then solid matter condensing like a planet or a sun, but it's all frequency. You can call some of it plasma, most of it. You can call it consciousness, you can call it whatever you want. But ultimately, when you put a microscope up to the universe, you don't get solid matter, you don't get particles, you get frequency. Now, Elena Danaan went into real strong detail on this beautifully with Thor Han. So there's Thor Han and Jen Han, his younger brother. Jen Han is in the sun building school on Era, which is a planet that orbits Taygeta in the Pleiades. And Thor Han is on a ship above our planet. He's a warrior, You know, he's working against the negative races, primarily the Draco, to help us to free ourselves from the Matrix. We have a lot of help. So Elena has been channeling Thorhan and Thor and Genhan. And Thorhan has been saying that the universe is a hologram, not in the way we think of a hologram, which is a light show, which is the fake thing that is created with light by a magician or something and to fake us out. That's not what it is. It's a geometrical frequential hologram. What else could it be if, as Tesla told us, that everything is energy, frequency, vibration? Ultimately, it ends up being just a frequential geometrical hologram. So the geometry is the key. Different geometries of frequency give us different manifestations. So a certain geometry or frequency can give you a human or a mountain or some plasma space. And to build a sun, as Genhan, Thorhan's younger brother, is finding out, it has to do with frequencies, building geometrical, frequential structures. So,
And gravity wells. You need gravity wells.
I mean, so whoever built the universe, whatever bunch of advanced races or however it came into being, if it just came into being naturally, who knows, whatever happened, it had to be a process of arranging geometrical structures that are frequential in nature.
We're kind of waking up to this reality right now with all the technological advancements. I mean, we can see artificial intelligence creating virtual worlds like entirely on their own, and not in a blink of an eye. You know, it takes a little bit of time, but it would take humans 100 times, maybe 1,000 times longer, you know, to create a virtual world like this. And the AI is expanding, and it's giving us an example of virtual space generated entirely, from thin air. I mean, there is a neural network that is coordinating all this. But then if we think of the other, advanced beings that have created this, right now, it's not out there in the wild. I mean, with all the advancements, like living in the present right now, it's like living in the, in the hotspot of all the conspiracy theories unfolding. Like, right. And people like take everything for granted, everything that's been happening in the last decade or so. They're taking it for granted. It's like nothing special happened, and everything is just like so mind-blowing. But I mean, we have the first glimpse at neural networks creating virtual realities on their own. And right now they're loose. They're gonna gain increasingly more power one year after another. And I think, everybody will wake up to the reality that we're living in a simulation. I don't know the exact details, but I've seen, there have been several cases where I've seen a virtual reality overlay this reality. I've seen like sacred geometry overlaid on this reality, and for me it was like mind-blowing. Then I completely realized we're living in a complex simulation. And I don't know what's happening here, but they're giving us some hints. And regarding the portals that you mentioned, the wormholes, I know that in 2014, NASA mounted a mission. They sent like 4 crafts to study the wormholes. I mean, the electromagnetic portals popping up in the upper Earth orbit. So that's been documented by 4 crafts with high capabilities of.
Those are called electron diffuse regions. The magnetic fields of the Earth and the magnetic fields of the sun, where they actually intersect, it creates, like, every few minutes, those things recorded these doors that open, these dimensional doors. Like, that's what happens between those 2 connecting magnetic fields between the sun and
Interesting.
the Earth.
So they're
those
related to
electron diffusions.
the Van Allen radiation belt, because that's
That one, I can't say that as much as this actually the magnetic fields of the Earth itself. I can't say if the magnet, because the Van Allen belts are a little bit closer in towards the Earth, aren't they? Than that. These are going to be out at the very end of the both magnetic fields where they actually connect itself, which is going to be somewhere away from the Earth, from the surface quite a bit. But anyway, but yeah, interesting. Electron diffused regions. Those are and that just shows natural places that can be used by any civilization. But if you get on the SOHO website, and actually that takes pictures of the sun every few minutes or so many seconds, you can actually go on there and look up like the archives for years back, and you can look up the different nanospectrums, like the yellow, the green, the blue. And when you start looking at some of this footage, sometimes you can see these objects coming in out of the sun, what are obviously craft.
Mm-hmm.
People have even recorded some of them that were their solar flares that were potentially Earth directed. Something's blocking it, like a big, huge cube. I mean, it makes the Borg cube look little, but whatever it is, these are, and taken into, understanding that some of those black spots that we're seeing on the sun are also portals of a type. And when you start dealing with these type 4 or 5 civilizations, heck, maybe even type 1 or 2, they're using the parent star as a portal that they use the sun. It's so interesting. Another like blind target I gave to Jessica Jones was the weaponizing. It was for the weaponizing of the natural portals of Earth. I've heard scientists talking about that. There's some of those cats from Dukes were saying that they're long past trying to prove portals exist, as opposed to trying to manipulate them and control them. That's the level they're at now. So I wanted to see like how they're doing progressively. So I gave that to her as a blind target. And the first thing she keeps hitting me with over and over coming up in this data, it's the sun. It's people messing with the sun. Civilizations messing with the sun, trying to control it as a portal and weaponizing it. I mean, that's terrifying. We listen to, so that's what came out of that data there. And something else I want to throw in that kind of goes back to your other question, Ross. Jessica Jones, again, I gave her another blind target. And this is me, okay? I am always curious. Like there's the Zimbabwe children from Africa that back in the 90s, they had that deal where they all saw the ship and they saw the extraterrestrials. They told them to take care of the planet, take care of yourself. And that's I don't have that book in here with me. I did. There's a book by Preston Dennett. Oh, here it is. It's called Schoolyard Encounters. All right. And it's got actually in this, I swear he's got about 80 accounts that are quite similar to the Zimbabwe children. In terms of that happens much more than we would think, these craft around schools. And also sometimes even to the point they're seeing beings and communicating with. And correlating this with those, everybody's familiar with several nuclear silos that have had UFOs around them controlling stuff.
Right.
Shutting stuff down, activating stuff. So my question was for this target is, who is behind that? Who is taking enough time to try to stop us from blowing the heck out of ourselves? And who's also taking time to really talk to these children that are, the future? And those Zimbabwe children, they're old now. One of them's my friend. I've communicated with her on Facebook, and she's got like grandchildren now, so they're not kids anymore, And I was asking, like I'd heard things that some of y'all remember now, not seeing aliens as much as seeing these orbs around you, floating around these orbs, but nonetheless, and that takes us into the quantum hologram principle and all that. But nonetheless, what organization is behind that cares enough about us to reach out to the kids multiple times and to mess with the nuclear weapons? And she's coming up with things. She doesn't know what she's looking at. She doesn't know what this is. And she's saying stuff, and Jock, I had to deal with it. She starts saying, what is this? Galactic Federation stuff. You know, the
Well,
beings that I've dealt with. Look, that. Forgive me, guys. Look, that name. Come on, it's kind of hokey. The Galactic Federation thing is, and then the beings finally. I had to be 36 before they gave me a name of the organization they were with. I asked for years, all these contacts, and I got no response on that. And the name I got was just as ridiculous as the Galactic Federation. The point is, oh no, I can't possibly tell people this, but it is what it is, you know. And nonetheless, that is really an organization that is reaching out and trying to stop things here from going really bad. It's a reality there. I mean, as the data speaks for itself, she's coming up with all that. And let's take this just a step forward. Flow with me, guys. All right. You know, you both have brought up, I think, plasma several times. And when dealing with plasma and real crop circles, you know, they found that it's actually high energy plasma balls that make those. There's even been caught on camera once or twice.
yep.
You know,
And they do
that's
it in a few seconds. They can create the crop circle in a few seconds, perfectly geometrical, and then they could disappear.
yeah. And you know, and what's fascinating about that, when you look at the work of Dr. Livingood and what he really did on as far as the crop circles, the crop itself, the nodes and the seeds themselves have underwent what they call a electron avalanche, which means once they're done being traumatized by that high microwaves that come with the plasma too, okay, is that they become so much more resilient and they produce like twice the biofuel that they did previously. So what we're seeing with that too is a way to also help combat food shortage. But when dealing with these plasma balls that make them, you know, I remember, I think Patty Greer is not a fan of mine, but she had said how they come down and this, or it's actually the Earth, the Earth's chakras. Don't fully agree. On those pictures, we see those spears going up and coming down when they make that crop circle in Wiltshire. Anyway, you know, I'd heard before these scientists saying also that they speculated that maybe these crop circles were also marking points for time travelers and particular humans from the future. So, does that mean, Jock, I'll throw this at you, does that mean that when we evolve beyond the containers of Homo sapien here, is our next evolution to something like high energy plasma, conscious plasma? And that they're coming back also because they might even need DNA for all we know. They can't do that anymore at whatever level those things are coming from. You know, and I can take that and kind of also correlate that when I talked to John Vivinko about the crop circles and some of those. He started talking about portals, including like the one that says SETI Ranch out there, but how you've got a portal like that, you've got on the other side, you've got just thousands and thousands of entities trying to squeeze through all at once. And when they actually do come through, they emerge, those that get through emerge over here in this dimension as an orb form, collective consciousness, for whatever reason, scientifically. Yeah, just again, food for thought. I'll just throw that out. But when thinking about the plasma, you know, so I gave another thing I gave to our friend Jessica to blind target was those plasma balls that were seen making that on that crop circle, and she started getting all emotional on me. She goes, "What is this? They're saying that we're in trouble, but it's not too late. It's not too late, and we have to have hope. We have to have hope." And she starts tripping. Barry, what is this?
Well,
Plasma balls making crop circles.
wow. Well, you know, Alex Collier has given us the information that fifth density and higher beings, but particularly fifth density beings, are stopping our nuclear weapons production and dismantling our arsenal of nuclear weapons, because what we do here in this third density or third dimensional realm affects their realm, the next realm, the next realm. Each density, each dimension is affected by what we do here because it's all connected, it's all one. And the Sasquatch say that they look at all dimensions as one. So it's not that they're traveling from one dimension to another exactly. It's that all dimensions are one. It's not a problem for them to appear and then disappear. And that's why it's so hard for us to find a Sasquatch that whose footprints then suddenly stop and then there's no more footprints. Where'd he go? Well, for them, it's not a problem to travel through the one-dimensional but many layered, let's say, universe. So we have benevolent races saying no to nuclear weapons. They've dismantled all of our nuclear weapons across the planet. Nobody has working nuclear weapons. So all of that's a stage show. We don't have anything to fear from nuclear weapons. What we have to fear is fear itself. We have to stop being afraid. We're being told to be afraid by the cartoons that kids are watching. It's all about drama and conflict and violence and someone killing somebody, and the kids are getting jolted every few seconds by these cartoons. And then we have the news, same thing, more fear, more fear, more fear. So if we have to get out of the fear matrix and go to what they have in the fifth dimension, skip past the fourth, hopefully, where there's all these astral beings that are coming at us, and then go to the fifth. I'm not an expert on this at all. Alex Collier's the expert, but he also talked about the sun as a hollow sphere. So in other words, what you're talking about when you say the sun is a portal, I want people to understand that Alex Collier, who has had 90 days of time with the Andromedans on their mothership, and for 30 years has been given us intel from them, and he has one of those minds that remembers. He doesn't forget. Everything they told him, he remembers. So they said the sun is a portal. It's hollow. Suns are hollow, not just our sun. Suns are portals. So you can portal from sun to sun. You can portal from this sun to a sun in another galaxy. So your intel is not just you talking and saying the sun's a portal and I'm just making this up. I have a good imagination. No, Alex Coller's given this backing for what you're saying.
Look, but
And
if you,
well, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Barry. So one quick question for Jock. If they dismantled the nukes, why haven't they done the same in the past, as the Mahabharata describes, and also Robert Oppenheimer says there's nothing new under the sun. He did not invent the atomic bomb. He wasn't the first to invent it. Why haven't they stopped, the nukes back then, describing the Mahabharata that wiped out entire civilizations, and we can see all the intricate caves in India that look like bunkers, and they're like thousands of years old.
That's a really good question, and people can answer that to the best of their abilities in the comments, because we're just I'm a playwright and a screenwriter, so I'm just new to this, and the only reason I'm interested in any of this or think that any of this is real is that I spent 2 years in the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. So people gave me information, and I know that each of us is on a journey. Roz, you had your own initiation event. You've seen things in the sky that are not normal, let's say. Barry's had his initiation event, and then more and more and more events. And so we're all just doing our best to get out of the matrix. So I don't know the answer to that question at all. And I hope that people who do know can give us the answer in the comments. So Barry, what do you think?
Throw something in on that. When coming to that, and something that I think when dealing with nuclear war is that really we have to look at time shifts and the real manipulation of timelines and time control, all right, and how actually it's often associating these time shifts that happen are associating with times of high solar activity. Like for example, a time shift would be when 9/11 happened. How many people remember that Manhattan was in the middle of a hurricane called Hurricane Aaron? Anybody can look that up on NOAA, but for some reason on 9/11, it was just clear that day and it was air traffic. But I had somebody live there say, I lived there. I don't remember that. And they look it up. You're right. There was a hurricane there. We just don't seem to remember things like that. These time edicts is also a time of high solar activity. And I think that one timeline that these dark demonics are always trying to jump us to is nuclear war. It comes up again and again. I don't know how much of it is fake and real, but I mean, it comes up, that threat comes up again and again. I think it's these civilizations that are trying to manipulate our timelines, that are trying to do that and put it to a point to where maybe humanity's not the stewardess for what little bit we are stewards of this planet anymore. Because I promise you, there's a whole host of civilizations ready to come in here and take over as stewardess of this place. and I think all of them not good, you know? So that's just food for thought. So I think maybe that's one reason we see it not being openly stopped to a greater degree than what it is, and then how much of it is free will also. Because, I had these contacts and I asked questions, and I asked, I always want to know, what's going to happen in the future. And they don't tell me nothing. I don't get no visions. Nothing happens. I'm in this blissed out place, but I'm not getting anything. But then they put in my mind, but this will never happen again. And I'm seeing something going around our solar system. Makes me think our orbits are like what we're told, the orbit of a burned out cinder looking thing, an ash looking thing going around the sun. And they're saying that will never happen here again. So that tells me that when we talk about how old the planet really is, something really bad cataclysm happened here probably a billion years ago or so. One of these first civilizations that was here. Whatever Lacerda said, 7 or how many have been here. I can remember epic through past life memories that's before this one, before the ones we hear about now. Something that would have been more similar to what there being a Pangea on this planet before the breaking of the continents, I think. So, stuff like this. And
Yeah, well, Lacerta said that we're the seventh creation of humans, and this first six weren't good enough, or for some reason displeased the creators. But that we're in the fifth civilization, so it's kind of confusing. But because, and we mark the civilizations by the apocalypses that destroyed the first four, and we haven't quite destroyed ourselves yet, or had been destroyed by advanced races, because as I said, we could be called an advanced race here, humanity, but we're not that advanced compared to the truly advanced races that have been here, advancing technologically and spiritually for
well,
millions or billions or more years. So, but I want you to talk, Barry, I want you to talk about the timeline wars.
That's cool. It might be too like First Contact, which in my opinion was the best of the Star Trek movies. But remember when they said the Vulcans, you got to break that warp barrier because they're passing through the solar system, but they have no interest in Earth. Too primitive. And on Spaceballs, wasn't John Candy? Waiter, check please. Well, they even got close to Earth. I mean, I'm just being honest. If you were like a Jedi and you were from even humanoid form, but you're somewhere that's kind of a semi utopian civilization, man, you're not going to want to come here at all. You're not going to want to come here and hang out. You're not going to want to drop by. Nothing. It'd be like going to prison to hang out for a little bit. Who wants to just go to visit prison unless you got a sentence? Sorry.
And
anyway,
many researchers come to the conclusion that this is a prison planet, and they've even used that term, and from different perspectives, just from the political perspective, so I think that we're starting to awaken to the fact that we're essentially, in one way or another, farm animals in a farming system, and that our energy is being used by other races for their purposes. Now, we do the same thing to animals, so we got to look at what we're doing too, if we're going to advance to the next level. So let's talk about timeline wars, because you mentioned this in a video that you sent me a couple of days ago, where you talk about how much more sense it makes for races who want to follow their own agenda to use time travel into the past to affect events to further their agenda, rather than space wars.
Mm-hmm. I okay. One thing is I had these experiences. Okay, with when I first had even come forward, I kind of, forgive me, but I just always call it what it is. I kind of clowned on the Nordics a little bit and the Pleiadians, because I was like, geez, does every Pleiadian look like Fabio and Kevin Sorbo as Hercules and Christy Brinkley? Every time I was looking for the red Ferrari when they show Pleiadians, like it's National Lampoon. And the fact that I didn't see any representations of ethnic melanin dominant extraterrestrials was very disconcerting. And then on top of that, I wasn't seeing any contactees who look like me. And then to combat this also, to combine this, compound it, would be that, especially when dealing in the Black community and contactees, it's always said, that there's the Nordics that have tried to not just get rid of the Black race, but that they've tried to also control the timelines, and they're the ones working with Hitler. I'd heard that. So, so taking this and trying to sort out the different types of Nordics, and I talked a lot, but at that point, I was still unaccepting that I myself had encountered a type of Nordics. And one of them is a gentleman that gave me a name, Alex, Alex. But when I first came forward, I talked about this. I call him a charter, and that they're these charters that come forward as far as what I've found out, is probably more by now, but every 7 years, for those of us that are lifetime contactees, every 7 years, one of these individuals, humanoid, comes out of a crowd from somewhere and just comes up, interacts with you for a few minutes, talks with you, and just says something really heavy. I mean, heavy stuff that just blows you away. And it takes your conscious forward, and they're gone. They go back into the crowd. And this happened to me, like what happened to me in a library. And the first time I came forward about this, a public place, bus station, airport, bookstore, and I come forward with this, and so many people started emailing me. Something like that's happened to me. And you don't know who these people are. They go back in the crowd, and there's nothing that when you look at one of these individuals, say, "Hey, are you an extraterrestrial?" It's not like that, okay? And especially when you're in a crowded place in a big city. But these individuals, there's something, if you can detect energy, there's something about their energy that pushes you forward. Not like somebody with ADHD does. This is different. It's like, only way I can describe it is their energy feels like more advanced in terms of, like, if we don't destroy ourselves, what will humanity be like in about 2,000 years? What will we, before we get rid of this container, what will we be like? They feel like that. Okay, so that's these charters anyway. But one of them I had encountered, he's a Caucasian, and these Nordics. I was on board this ship as a kid. It's actually the first UFO I'd seen as a kid at 7 years old. And then when I got older, I kind of just forgot it. And that's almost impossible, because I was 32 years old. My mother was calling me. She called me and told me she's gonna throw out one or two of the boxes I'd had over there decades there, and in it was a box of Omnis. I used to like the Omnis back in the 80s and 90s because they had a section in there called antimatter, which they talked about contact scenarios and extraterrestrial races.
And
And this one had
Omni is a magazine for those who are too young to know.
yeah, I guess so. That is dating myself, isn't it? Gosh, it's been out of circulation 20 years by now.
It's a science magazine, Omni. Yeah.
It was a good one, I thought. We need more stuff like that. But there were all these UFOs that have on these 2 pages. I was looking at it. And my mom was walking by, and she goes, "Oh, that one right there looks like the one you and I saw." What? And she's looking at me. She goes, "Oh," she said, "You with Mr. Creepy Star Trek memory, you can't remember seeing that UFO?" And she had to really say several things for it to jar my memory.
Wow.
And I was 7 years old, and it was my birthday, and I had gotten something. This will date me too. I gotten a toy that was called a Stretch Armstrong, and it's like the first day you pulled it, this red gel started coming out of it, like he's splitting. And my mom said, "That's nuclear goo. We got to exchange it." So we were doing that this day, and I see this craft. And only time that I've got a good memory, especially after the accident I went through, that I died in 2010. I sustained all these brain injuries, and they said I never had, my memory would be gone, and it's not. I was very blessed, but so I'm somewhat obsessed about my memory, and that's there. But this is way before that. But anyway, the fact that I couldn't remember this is before my accident. The fact I couldn't remember what she was talking about fully disturbed me, and I'm like, the only time that happens is when it involves the star beings. Okay. At a point that my brothers are much older than I, like one 12, the other one 19 years older than I. And the one closest to me, I said, "Man, it seems like I didn't see it." You start yelling, "Yeah, you saw it, man. When I got home, you and mom were talking me to death about that thing. You definitely saw it." So, I wanted to find out more. So I did a regression for it. And I was unprepared for the information that came forward. And it says a lot about some of the technologies that these civilizations, these beings can use that involves bilocation. And they can bilocate our astral body, our dream body into one of those craft near them. And so I'm looking at these beings, and I can also see through this almost a wall. And I've got illustrations on my YouTube channel of this. When the gentleman goes like this, and I can see my mother and I stand down there. I'm looking at the Stretch Armstrong probably as much as the ship. I'm wanting a new toy. So I could see some reasons that kind of just process through, but also something about the bilocation has a kind of amnesia type of effect to it. At least the technology I think they were using. But even more to the point, this screen that I could look almost transparent, almost down to the where our feet would be almost. It also looked like a perfect way to record an event in an era. And if you have individuals that are historians, that's a perfect way to record history as well, or preserve timelines as well. And these individuals, the one standing was Alex. There are two sitting. They have these boxes on them. The seats they're sitting in are lower than these little boxes they have on with these wires. And these two, they're not like identical twins, but they're like fraternal. They look that way, but only he communicated with me. And going back, I had probably a few years before that, I had a local psychic named White Dove I interacted with several times since I was 16. We worked together several times. And she had told me one day, she said, you're the first UFO you saw with a parent, your friend gave you something from on board that craft, and you probably just can't remember it. Or she said, you can't remember it. And I looked at her, I was like, I never saw a UFO with a parent. I couldn't remember this. She's looking at me real funny. She said, oh, I think you definitely have. You just can't remember it. Even at the time, you thought they were just on a scout mission, but it was about you. They were there because of you. And, I finally figured out later that not long after seeing this UFO, my mother's an antique collector. I was with her at this antique shop, and I met this gentleman that I thought worked there, but then he didn't. I found out he didn't, probably. But, it was an interaction with this guy, and he gave me this rock. I have it in here, right here, this rock. And it was because it looked like one that's a river stone that was in this. Like I said, my mom collected antiques, and I was in this. Oh, sorry, you didn't see it. It doesn't look really that great unless I took it to the ultraviolet room at the rock show, and it has glowing specks in it. Guys, like, where'd you get this? So, but anyway, this was at this one shop my mother was at. They had a book section, and in this glass waterfall looking thing was this rock and some others. And I wanted this one because it looked like a rock that was on this TV show I was watching after school on Nickelodeon. After You Can't Do That on Television, where they dumped the slime. But this was called Under the Mountain. And it was a gentleman that named Mr. Mr. something. Anyway, he came from another galaxy, okay, to fight these mud creatures called the Wilberforce. And it was just so good, and I vibed with it for some reason. And this guy, I wanted this rock, and this guy approaches me from back the thing. And the first thing he comes up to me and he says, young man, do you think igneous rocks are metamorphic by nature? And I remember my response. I was like, yeah, but it takes millions of years. It needs to be like Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. It needs to be immediate. And he's looking at me laughing because it doesn't work like that. Now, my question to you is this, Jock. Who do you know that comes up to a 7-year-old kid and asks a question like that? Unless you know something about them. In terms of, my brother had just been recently laughing at me because I was trying to boil and freeze these sandstones and these rocks, trying to turn them into quartz. And, no one knew I was doing that except for my brother, so this gentleman, stuff like this, and he winds up giving me this rock. And he tells me, he says, as I'm walking out, if one thing says, I'm going to give this to you, but I want you to fill this out. And he gives me this blue card. And as we're leaving, he says, that's a very special stone. You should put it under your bed and dream with it, under your pillow and dream with it. That's what he said. I remember getting in there and my mom's looking at me. She goes, "Boy, that white man was very taken with you." And she's just running the other side of the deal. So I was in eyesight the whole time in the store. You know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, I don't care. I just want this rock, you know. And when I look at this thing he gave me, he said, fill this out. It's free. It was for the Mineral and Gem Society in my state. Somewhere I've went several times since, and I didn't understand the connection that there is between crystals and stones, that there is with these craft and with these beings. You know, something like people laugh at Shirley MacLaine when she said that she's on one of the last Oprahs before Oprah started her own network, and people on there laughing at her. Oprah was a little bit because she was talking about all the UFOs that come over her ranch in, I believe, New Mexico. And she said stars come in their hot tub and they see them going into the mountains and people trip out. And Oprah's like, why are they around there? She said, well, on my property close to there is that I don't want to say the wrong word, caldera mine that blew all the crystals out. And she said, I'm sure that those craft are amplifying them or using them or they're doing something.
Well, this structure behind me in this image is the Matterhorn, and it's supposed to be igneous rock, granite. And you wonder, the geology, the academic geologists are telling us that our continents came into existence naturally, and the tectonic plates are big in the mountain formation, and they're coming together and folding hills and forming mountains naturally over time, over great periods of time. But then you have a structure like this, and you wonder, is that really the case? Is that really the case that tectonic plates are doing that? Or perhaps were the continents formed by advanced races who knew what they were doing, who were creating scalar energy devices from what we would call igneous rock, and it is igneous in the sense that perhaps they could form it within a moment or a few moments by heating up this magic mineral recipe that they created for a specific reason, a specific mix of minerals that they wanted to help channel to conduct energy from this incredible crystalline, also crystalline ball that we call Earth, that is actually called Terra by the Galactic Federation. We are known as Terra. So perhaps there's another way to look at these igneous structures. Yes, this stuff was heated up specifically to make it strong, to make it durable, to last through time, because why build continents once? Why build continents many, many times when you could just build them once and have them last? So I think that the continent builders, if we accept the theory, were building to last, and they were heating up their material, their magic mineral recipes, to really high temperatures, just like the concrete on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, that is compressing all of that clay material to create scalar energy fields, as Ken Rolla has told us. And you can find that video. It's the Blueprint for Existence on the Bosnian Pyramids YouTube channel. So we have science coming toward an idea about our world that is different. When we look at the mineral recipes of our continents, we could have another way of looking at them. Were advanced races creating these in a few moments, or were they coming into existence over millions of years through natural forces? Well, we're going to have to make a decision, as the global mind is going to have to weigh these theories. Right now, academia only allows one theory in their universities, and that's that everything came into existence through natural forces. So Barry, we're coming up to 2 hours, so we got 8 minutes. So what do you want to? What's your main message to humanity right now? It's 2023. We're coming into 2024. What do you want to tell us?
Well, the fact anyone's still listening to me blows me away, man. I still can't believe it. I thought at the first interview I did, I thought I was going to be off the hook. Yeah. You know, I think most important thing right now is continuing going forward consciously. Doing platforms like this, everybody using the new network of communication we have, this internet, to really illuminate things and to also do and not just research, but things in the realm of action. You know what I mean? It's one thing to learn about meditation techniques or learn about warrior techniques, but put them into action. You know what I mean? That's what really gets tangible third dimensional results. It's action, going through love. You know, it doesn't, do something nice for somebody every day. Things like that are really important right now, you know, and more if you're having experiences don't be afraid to share them in the right on the right platform. That's starting to evolve more and more. There's never a day that I thought I could talk about this openly. I always said I was going to, but man, that was just talk. If it wasn't for my accident, I never would have really did it. It's not very conducive to one's career. But but that would be my thing. I would say mostly is things that are going to make this world into a type 1 civilization. More what Gene Roddenberry was trying to show on the bridge of that Enterprise. We're still trying to get there to really become part of the galactic trade again, become a galactic civilization again. We really need to join that. We've been a part of it before, and for whatever reason, this planet is all that's done in darkness now. That stuff needs to be illuminated, exposed. So we got to learn as much as we can to go forward. Something that I didn't mention is that the Earth is what I was taught is it's like an onion. There's so many layers, dimensionally, and density is like the layers of an onion. And they're just a frequency between some of them. So when you do things like blowing up bombs or these horrible things that rip the fabric of space-time continuum, you don't know how many dimensions you're going in and ripping. That book I mentioned, The Earth, the Only Planet of Choice, they called this council of 9 from the zone of cold that's being channeled. They call these dimensions on Earth civilizations with an S, and saying how close they are and how advanced some of them are that are right here on Earth, which takes us kind of in the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, which is we have an advanced race that's living right here on Earth with us, both in Earth and outside, that we see their technology all the time, but what's being used is space, and that they're out there in dimensions when really they're right here, third dimension, living with us. So food for thought.
Well, when we're talking about the universal hologram, the frequential geometry structure hologram that we live in, and this is from Thor Han through Elena Denon, we get back to what Roz was saying, which is that we ourselves, this naked ape who's not that smart, we've already begun to create virtual worlds. We have a video game called No Man's Sky, which came into existence a few years ago. And through a technique called procedural generation, they created a game in which visitors to the game could visit any one of 18 quintillion plus planets. So we've already created, a few guys working for the No Man's Sky video game operation, have already created 18 quintillion possible planets with their own biospheres, their own terrain, their own unique animals and plants. And
Wow.
when you visit one of these planets, let's say that you then take a week off and then from the game or whatever, and then you come back a week later, it's the same planet. You can revisit the same planet with the same terrain. It's always there in a virtual world. Now, if we, who are not that advanced compared to the other races in the universe, if we can create 18 quintillion planets that are unique planets, what have they been doing?
Yeah.
With all the time.
Creating universes to a degree.
I mean, compared to them, we're barbaric animals who are just realizing that we have some skills and that we might have a place in the universe. What have they been doing? Wouldn't it be fun to build real planets? I mean, the virtual planets in No Man's Sky video game are just as real because they're frequential planets as our planet is in some sense. It's all frequency, right? But we're able to, as characters in the universal video game, and by the way, it's okay to be a character in a video game because we have free will. We are not like characters in the video games that we create where the characters don't have free will. Because we have free will, we are as real as we need to be to consider ourselves to be real beings, right? So it's okay that if we agree, and if we decide eventually that we're in a universal hologram, it's okay for us to be characters in that holographic video game because we have free will. Everything in the game has free will. Every bacterium has free will. Every plant has free will. It's making its decisions based on its environment. Oh, there's some sun over there. I'm going this way. So the astounding possibility is that all of this frequency is manifesting in ways that give us our world that seems material, that we interact with as solid, but that is in fact a frequential geometrical structure, just like the frequential geometrical structures in a video game that we perceive when we go into the video game and watch it. And so it's just another level of solidity. So in the video game, you can't touch the rocks and plants that you see in the animals quite. You can see them, can't touch them. But then in our level, where the advanced races created this video game, we can feel the pressure of the rock or the plant or the tree that we think of as solidity, but it's really just energetic pressure. And we're feeling it as touch, but we're never really touching anything because it's not solid thing touching solid thing. It's frequential, energetic forms that are pressing against and resisting the pressure of touch. And that's what we feel as touch. What a wild world that is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic
definitely.
stuff, man. Yeah, I'm literally absorbed into what you guys are saying, and yeah, it's just amazing looking at all the this pool of possibilities. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, what the future holds for us, it's amazing in a sense. If we would end up, I mean, according to our vibration, as you already said, if we're gonna live in fear and delve in fear and lower our vibration, probably the future outcome would not be an utopic one, but then if we maintain our vibration, through diet and through exercises, through alkalinity and through positivity, in a pragmatic way, I believe the outcome for the future will hold a lot of answers, because a lot of people are waking up to this reality, as advancements come into the light. And I feel that, artificial intelligence and all the technological capabilities that we have right now are speeding up the process so hard. So there's this theory of a guy called Terence McKenna, the immovable object at the end of time, that says that as we are spiraling through the universe towards the center, towards the black hole or whatever it's out there, time on the planet, the advancement is moving so rapidly that maybe like 500 years ago, we were advancing in a few fields, and it would take us, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years to advance, but I'm sticking to hundreds. And right now, the same advancements are done on a huge scale, and only in a few years, maybe in a few months right now with the artificial intelligence. So I feel that situation is going to escalate pretty quickly, and we're going to open to in a face of a new paradigm that's going to be so much more empowering to the people. So I'm really looking forward to that, and to all that people have said throughout the years that have been dismissed as mere nonsense, all that stuff, becoming much more tangible and becoming a reality, probably pretty soon in the future. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and it's great that Barry could come on and give us some real deep, personal, tangible intel, because you said that you were in the biosphere, the biofields of these advanced races. And for those who want to look up biofield tuning, it's a healing system that uses sound. So anyway, so you've given us evidence from your experience, your tangible experience in the physical space of other races that most people don't know about. I've been in this for a few years, and I didn't know about many of the species that you're talking about. and people can go to Barry's channel and find out about some of these amazing species who are so advanced and are willing to help us on some level or another, willing to not war against us, which is nice.
Yeah.
And so I would really recommend people go to Barry's YouTube channel, which is Barry Littleton, and check out his amazing intel. Barry, thank you so much for coming on Archaic Knowledge Podcast. We're just starting this podcast, and Roz is going to take the helm from here on. It's going to be amazing. We're really appreciative of you laying the foundation, because I think it's super important for people to understand that we are not alone. We are one of many advanced races, and we're the newest advanced race, and we're not that advanced. We have to stay incredibly humble to the greatest extent when we look at what other races have accomplished, and we can look forward to hoping to get to some of those levels that you talked about, the plasma evolution, let's say. And we're all plasma beings, but we have places to go. We have energetic beingness, energetic isness to look forward to that we don't experience here in third density. So thank you, Barry, for coming on the show and letting people know that we live in a universe that's far more complex than we've been told.
Well, thank you for emphasizing the science, because that's the foundation that I used for my experiences. And also, I found that I always said that between 70 to 80% of our population are in contactees in the dream cycle, and are just unaware of it, a large portion. And so far on this platform, nothing I found to disprove that. So if you think something's happened, definitely pursue it and investigate it, enrich yourself.
Barry, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you,
Absolutely
guys. I
amazing.
appreciate you both.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And let's stay in love, because love is the key. And occasionally we have humans coming along telling us that. And I think the advanced races would agree. So thank you, sir. I really appreciate it.